Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Littleton's Alumni Field Renovation Advisory Design Committee, otherwise known as Afrac. It's November 9th, 2016. We are calling this meeting to order at 10 after 7. Sorry it's a little bit late. I'm a little bit late getting home from work tonight. So the agenda is as follows. 7:10 we call to order. We will have an opportunity for public input as we always do at the beginning and the end of the meeting. So there will be public input. We are scheduled to have an update tonight from Gale Associates, and just found out minutes ago that the representative for Gale, John Perry, who is our lead designer, is in Orlando with his family, and his coverage had something else come up and is unable to be here tonight. So kind of unfortunate, but we can certainly get through a few things that we need to get through. We will, as needed, we'll have an update on the town meeting presentation. I think we're pretty tight, and not sure we're going to need too much on that. But just some conversation around town meeting and how that's going to work. Another opportunity for public input, and then we'll look to adjourn. And if any time anybody has any input from the members, please feel free to do that. If anybody from the public cares to be acknowledged, I just ask that you come forward to the microphone, introduce yourself and your address, and address any questions or any comments through the chair. So, public input is next up on the agenda. So, Kevin, you good? So, Mr. Glady's good. The rest of the folks are all set.
What
about member input? Do you guys have anything that needs to be discussed, or any questions or open-ended items that you'd like brought up at this time? Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, Gale Associates was to be with us tonight and do kind of just their closing presentation with the final drawings, and they're not here, so I think everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at the plans, the drawings, the cost estimates. PNBC took a look at them last Wednesday evening, and had an opportunity to go through them and put together a kind of a list of things that we should take a look at and make sure that they're included in the final design should the project be approved, which is when pretty much we hand it over to PNBC if the project's approved. And nobody else has any comments. I've got a few comments I'd like to make relative to funding and to some conversations that are going on around town. This is coming up at town meeting. It will be it's article number 7 on the town meeting warrant. It is an article that requires a 2/3 majority vote in order to pass. So the article has been voted unanimously by the Board of Selectmen, by the school committee, by the Park and Recreation Commission, and by our Finance Committee. The Finance and Advisory Committee has voted unanimously to support this. There's been a lot of stuff handed out. There was some stuff handed out yesterday at the polls, folks for and against Alumni Field, and I just caution folks that if you do have any questions, please seek out. I'd be more than happy to field any questions you have. My email address is all over town, but if you do have any questions specifically with me, I can be reached at chuckdlttn@gmail.com. If you did receive either of these documents and you'd like clarity or clarification on any of the details that are on either of them, please reach out to me for clarification, or members of the Board of Selectmen. Certainly, Mr. Glaby's here tonight, and he's kind of my cohort relative to fields in the town. There was a presentation done Monday night by Bonnie Holston, who's the Assistant Town Administrator, to discuss the funding plan. And the funding plan is something that is supported, again, by FinCom, and it's something that was proposed by Steve Venuti, who is our town treasurer, and by Bonnie Holston. It is the plan that they feel good about and puts us in good position moving forward. It's a plan that they are not stating will have any effect on our bond rating. Anytime you do any kind of bond, any kind of spending or any kind of borrowing, there is the opportunity to have a reevaluation of your bond rating. So just like if you or I were to take out an extra credit card, next time you apply for any kind of credit, that goes against your credit rating. So anytime we do borrow, whether it be within the levy or outside the levy, that may have an impact on our bond rating.
Can I just interrupt there? One thing to keep in mind about that is, it's not the fact that you're borrowing. It's what they're looking at is how much you're borrowing relative to your other financial considerations as an entity, in this instance, the town. It's how you're going to manage paying back the borrowing. It's how you're going to manage using the money for its specified purpose. And it's how you're going to make sure that you don't have to borrow again because you didn't do a good job when you executed on the project originally. So it's a multifaceted, encompassing. The fact that we're borrowing shouldn't be a shock, and certainly isn't a shock to any bond rating agencies. They fully expect municipalities to borrow money. That's what capital is about. You typically borrow because you typically beyond your initial annual cash flows, just like any company would do, or even a household would do. So, that's something that we do on a regular basis. We have many capital projects that we execute on, and frankly, we'll always have capital projects that we execute on. You build things, they wear out, you need new things, you expand, you grow, whatever it is. So this is fairly straightforward concepts. Whether or not this particular project, this or the fire station, which are the two big borrowing articles on the warrant this time, are something people support, it's fine to consider that, but the idea that we're borrowing inside the levy shouldn't be a shock to anyone, and certainly isn't to any bond rating agencies.
So I'm not going to go in line by line, which I did do personally. I took a document on one of the folks that were telling you to don't let them spend all of our savings. So those are the folks that I perceive as being opposed to the spending plan as it's been laid out by the folks that have either been elected in this town, have been appointed in this town to be the stewards of our funds and of our budgets, and also the professionals that have been doing this for a long time, in our Assistant Town Administrator of Finance and Budget and our Treasurer. We are in the position that we are in as far as our bond rating and our financial health is concerned, based on good fiscal decisions, and the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and the other boards that are supporting this unanimously, along with the folks that do this every single day, day in, day out, have put us in a good position, and they are the ones that are recommending that we fund these projects using the methods that we've laid out. So please take an opportunity, if you did not get an opportunity, to hit the email that was on that document and get the fact sheet that was sent directly to your email. It's an auto reply. There are a lot of misstatements. There's a lot of misleading statements. And frankly, I perceive some of what's on that to be lies. And I would ask that you, happy to field any and all questions over the next week. I hope that I get a lot of questions. And again, the town meeting vote requires a 2/3 vote to pass. That is by design. Because 2/3 is very difficult to get, and that is by design, so that there is a check and a balance based on an article coming before the town. The funding strategy that was put forth by Bonnie, which was presented again on Monday night because it was requested to be presented again. So the Board of Selectmen accommodated that request. It does not show deficits as have been discussed. It does show the effect that us borrowing within the levy will have on total funding available for capital. So, Julie, you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could comment on like the operational budget. That's something I've heard a lot about, so I don't know if you or maybe Mike could comment on the impact or lack thereof on the operational budget.
Well, the thing to consider is that the amount of money that we're projecting to borrow for all of our capital projects, not just Alumni, inside the levy, is money that we have typically been using to service other debt inside the levy, primarily the high school and the Shaker Lane renovation that happened years ago. So it's not like we're taking existing cash flow that is already being used for operations out of that bucket or cash flow into another purpose and putting immediate pressure on operations. That's definitely not the case. What is the case is that, as always, when you think about your taxes that we collect and the local aid that we get from the state, how we decide as a town to manage those monies to meet all of our obligations in terms of providing services, facilities, amenities, however you want to phrase it, there's always a balance to be struck between what we decide to spend operationally and what we might decide to do in a capital. Other municipalities might decide that they feel like they need more operational revenue, so that when they need to do capital, they will go outside the levy to do it. That's a way to do it. Some will decide that they're never going to go outside and they're going to do everything inside the levy. I mean, I don't think you can do everything, but they're going to do a lot, more than we even do. And they're just going to live with the fact that they're going to have as much left over for operations. I personally feel like we have struck a measured balance over many years in doing this. So to think that there might be pressure on operations, this might put pressure on operations along with all the other factors that might put pressure on the operational budget, like tax revenues, local aid, the economy in general, growth in town. It's a very complex, multifaceted equation that gets dealt with year in and year out by many boards and committees in town that have to work together to make it all come to fit together year by year. We do it year by year. We have our projections. That's why some people are showing deficits. Those are projections on long-term horizons on what might happen based on a set of assumptions. There's probabilities it could happen. It could be worse than they're projecting. It could certainly be better than they're projecting. Those models are designed not to show certainty, it's to show probabilities and to give the opportunity for the people who make these decisions and the voters themselves the opportunity to evaluate, what these choices can mean. That's all it is. So I don't feel like we're putting any more pressure on operations than we already do, because we've made conscious choices that that's how we want to budget our town or manage our money in town.
It's specific to this project. The funding mechanism that's been laid out will have an impact on the potential that we would spend on capital, because we will, over the next 7 or 8 years, pay down the debt service that we will incur, which will be in short 1-year bands, bond anticipation notes, that will pay about $500,000 a year for 8 years. And if we committed $4 million after the bids and everything come back, 8 times 500,000 is $4 million. So So there will be some change in the ability for us potentially to use the funds that we're using for this capital investment. But right now, the Board of Selectmen and FinCom and our financial professionals, we earmark about $2.5 million a year, right, Paul, for capital expenditures. We don't always spend to that $2.5 million, and this will bring that $2.5 million to, assuming there is no change with an economic upturn, an economic uptick, an economic downturn. There may or may not be snow and ice money available. There may or may not be additional revenues from, as Mike mentioned, tax revenue coming in, growth, for instance, the Point or other growth in town. There are other funding sources that we could potentially bring in that we can't anticipate that. We don't have a crystal ball. So to say that there will or will not be an impact is speculative.
I just want to make one more comment. The other thing to think about is, because comments have been made, like, if we do this, it increases the likelihood or the possibility of an operational override on Proposition 2.5 versus a debt override. And the difference being that you can take an operational override back, but it's very difficult, and I don't think it's ever happened. Once it goes in, your tax rate goes up and it stays up. On a debt override, your taxes go up for the length of the debt. And when the debt is retired, your taxes will go down unless you replace that borrowing with something else, which often happens. But here's another thing to keep in mind. If we borrow too much inside the levy, and because of other factors, we found that we couldn't provide the services the town decides they need, you don't necessarily have to go for an operational override. You can take the existing debt that you're servicing inside the levy, outside the levy. At that point, we've contemplated that at a couple of town meetings when we had the high school debt inside the levy. Things were tough. A couple people brought motions on the floor to conceivably pull the high school out that would free up that cash flow to go back in operations. Our taxes would go up to service the debt. It was ultimately voted down both times, but the opportunity is there to do that. So there are multiple options for dealing with what we hope are unlikely scenarios. But if they do happen, there is no reason to assume that your tax rate will be permanently go up because we have to raise money to pay for teachers, fire, police, roads, whatever it is. We might just pull the debt, and it might be that we paid half the debt down, so now we're going to pull the second half of the payments outside the levy, use the cash flow to put it back on operations, and our taxes go up for 10 years on, say, for the fire station instead of 20 years. I doubt that's going to happen. It kind of almost happened with the high school, but not really, and we managed. So there's flexibility. Nothing is set in stone. Just because you go down one road doesn't mean you can't change paths later on if we get in a corner where we feel like we need to make some changes in how we're administering our finances. Right?
Want me to?
Yeah, sure. You want to go, Brian?
You've been at this long. You've been on the FinCom and on the selectmen longer than I have.
Yep.
So.
Paul Glavy, Finance Committee, formerly selectman now and formerly, and I think also germane to one of the points in that handout, member of the Financial Policies Subcommittee, as is Mike. Just put a little context here. The debt space under the levy limit that's being proposed to pay for the field project almost as an afterthought to the effort that went in to see whether or not we could afford to do the fire station under there. And the reality is the cost of both of these projects are smaller than the amount of debt that's been coming off the books. And that space in the budget has been already created in the budget for 20 years. This is not, and if it isn't spent on this, it'll, by our own policies, be spent to pay off some other debt, water department debt or who knows what. So the money that's being designated to pay for these projects, the borrowings for these projects, is money that we've essentially already created the space for 20 years ago, and it's just by virtue of the timing of those projects coming off the books right now. And they have been gradually for the past few years, and we've been paying for a number of little projects are paying off debt ahead of schedule, that sort of thing. To do that, there's no impact on any operational budget as a result of that. The only way there could be is if we threw our policies out the window and took money that is currently designated as budget space for paying off debt and used it for operational budget. And we don't do that for very good reasons. Generally GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices, says the municipal budget should have somewhere between 5 and but no higher than 10% of their budgets be designated toward debt payment. And that's an accounting rule, but it also has a very practical stabilizing effect within the budget because it doesn't grow. Unlike personnel costs and other things that have a growth factor associated, you can look at it every year as a fixed cost, which allows other things, frankly, to grow at higher rates because our revenue, annually is smaller than our operational cost growth. So not to get too deep in the weeds there, but this is not impacting anything else. The other point too is specific to the language in the financial policies, which was just adopted a couple of years ago, and I was a party to that discussion about we should be putting projects out for debt exclusion overrides unless there's a plan to do otherwise. Well, this is exactly the type of plan that is referenced and anticipated there, and the truth is that bylaw, or not that bylaw, that policy has only been on the books a couple of years, and it's never been used. We've alternately, depending upon what our finances allowed, have brought projects in with a request for an override, like this building, or without one, like the high school, the Shaker Lane renovations, basically on the availability of debt space under the levy limit and the prioritization. So those are the real two factors. Do you have space available? And where does it rank in the prioritization of spending projects? And that's the reality of it. And we can't do everything under the levy limit. We'd like to, but, a lot of it we can do, and we can do it prudently.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so just to kind of recap what Paul said, that the town's financial policy does not require a ballot vote and for capital projects, and a yes vote will not raise your taxes. Thank you. All right. Let's see, I lost my agenda. Anything else you want to do?
Well, I mean, at this point, I have it in my mind that we should entertain a motion because we have the other boards that have voted to support the project. We're kind of getting to the end of the road. We're going to town meeting. Hopefully, we're going to get good news there. But even if we do, we're going to kind of hand this thing over to the PNBC. So I would like to make a motion that the Alumni Field Redesign Advisory Committee vote to support the Alumni Field project as it's being presented to town meeting on November 16th.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, so I think it's, we've gone through this whole process.
We've had discussion. I mean, I think that we've had a very lengthy, involved, consensus-building exercise towards what we expected out of this project. We solicited a tremendous amount of public input, both people that we invited to come before us, such as the athletic director, Park and Rec, Highway Commission, the youth sports organizations, et cetera. We did research on different alternatives, aspects of the project, and we had a tremendous amount of public input and provided a tremendous amount of opportunity, both in terms of the number of times we met and the way we conducted the meetings. So, I really regarded this as a consensus-building exercise. I feel like we've had the discussion, and I hope this is a, kind of a pro forma vote at this point.
Yeah, I think everybody here has although we may have different on certain components, I think everybody here has always stated that they are in favor of the project and the article moving forward, so.
Yeah, and we'll continue to obviously engage with the public too, if the public still has questions.
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
we
yeah,
would
yeah.
Still, of course,
Absolutely.
accept questions and discuss with people.
We may stop meeting, but we won't be done.
I'm aware of that. I'm acutely aware of that.
All right, so the moved and seconded, we've had some discussion. I'm going to take the vote now, so all those in favor of the motion as eloquently stated by Mr. Fontanella, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it is unanimous. So the Afrac committee has unanimously voted to support Article 7, which I would hope would be the case, as we are the folks that have been charged with designing the project and bringing the project forward. At this point, if there is anyone else, Mr. Glavy or Mr. Davis, if you have anything to add as far as public input, otherwise I'll seek a motion for adjournment.
Wait, one other thing,
Sorry.
the special town meeting presentation.
Sorry.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had to meet for that.
We don't really, all I wanted to say about that was, it'll be done, incorporated the feedback that we got last meeting. The only thing I would like to ask is that we will be making a presentation, I think we talked about, I'll lead out, Chuck will talk about the funding mechanism at the end of the presentation. It's not going to be a real long thing. We're not going to really be debating the merits of the project or rehashing everything we've done. We're just going to kind of go down the line with what the process was like and what the considerations were and where we ended up. It might not be bad if we all kind of sat together in the, kind of that section on the floor where the different committees and stuff sit. So if you're inclined to at least sit there until that part of the meeting is done, that might be a good idea in case, we all want to try to answer questions that are asked. If we want to quickly kibitz, we can do that. And actually, we should post for that too. We should post.
Yeah.
Everybody else posts, so we should post. In case there is, I don't know, anticipate any deliberation,
That's good,
but it's conceivable that we would deliberate.
So I'm going to
If
post.
somebody puts, I guess if there were petitions on the floor, citizens petitions or
In
amendments.
regards to the presentation for town meeting, have you heard any, has anyone sent any emails or anything that we missed that they want to see?
Nope, I don't think so. I think they're just waiting on us to give them the actual file so they can load it and have it decked up and ready to go. So-
And that has to go soon.
Yeah, so we're gonna get it there in the next 24 to 48 hours.
It's deadline's Monday morning, but
Yep.
Tim just wants an
So-
opportunity to take a look at it. make
Even
sure
if we
it's-
give them, even if I give them a version, and if I feel like I
Can
gotta
amend
change a
it.
font or something, I can just send it, so, resend it.
Yeah, if there is a need to do any kind of changes or anything like that, he would rather not see anything go past 12 o'clock on Wednesday, but
Things happen.
Okay.
things happen. That's why they made flash drives. All right, so that makes sense. You know, if we can, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to
Yeah, you gotta sit with the selectmen, right?
sit in the sandbox, but
You guys can come sit with the school committee. I invite you.
so the school committee does sit down front to the right. If you're looking at the Board of Selectmen, if you're looking at the front of the hall, off to the right, so maybe right in behind those crazy people.
Versus the other crazy people.
Yeah. All right. I apologize for Gail not being here tonight. I would have liked to have seen a final presentation. I will try to engage with them to see if there might be an opportunity for them to get in front of LCTV.
Oh, that's a good.
But I don't know whether or not that'll happen.
Yeah, it's short turnaround.
Before we adjourn.
Are you saying this is the last Afrac meeting? Or
No.
when would the next one be?
They have to be after town.
I think it'll be after town meeting. I think, does anybody see the need for us to meet before town meeting strategically or anything?
I mean,
Okay.
if the presentation is set, we should be fine.
Yeah, thank you for everybody that put that together. Appreciate that. So, all right, well, thank you for coming out.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion been made, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Motion then?
Michael made the motion, Michael made the second.
Which time?
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night. And town meeting is next Wednesday at 7 PM. The
middle school?
16th at the middle school gym, the Charles Ford K Gymnasium. And for this particular article, we do need a 2/3 vote. So if you are in support of it, we appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Yeah.